Good evening, everybody. Good to see everybody with us tonight. Tonight, I'm going to bring a lesson to everybody slowly, as I've been told, about how we should have our attitude towards money. Now, tonight, we're going to have a lesson that's going to be more introspective, which means we're going to be looking in the mirror and looking at ourselves. You know, George Strait says, truth about a mirror is that a mirror doesn't really tell the whole truth because it doesn't tell what's inside. So tonight, hopefully, and don't take the words down. Like I said, I have problems. Nobody here is going to dispute that. Don't let my problems keep you from taking something from this lesson tonight and applying it to yourself, because everybody in this building has problems. If you point at everybody and say, well, who are you to tell me something? You're not any better than me. We're never going to learn, because you got to tell each other how you're supposed to live. And that's what preaching's all about. And if you don't like my lesson tonight, throw tomatoes at me or kick me off the stage or write me a dirty letter, but we'll do that afterwards. So tonight, we're going to talk about, usually when I preach lessons in the past about our attitude towards money being getting more of it. Now tonight, I'm going to talk about, what do you do with the money that you got? Do you pinch it? Do you try to bury it? What is our attitude towards money in life? So what does Peter say in 1 Peter 4, 9 through 10? That's not on there, but where's my clicker at? We'll just use this. That works. This is up here. So this verse isn't on the slide because I couldn't find it until I asked Mom about it. But 1 Peter 4, 9 says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So what are we supposed to do with our money? We're supposed to be good stewards of our money. We're not supposed to waste it. We're not supposed to blow it. Everything God has given us is a gift from him, and we should be good stewards of that. In John chapter 6, after feeding the 5,000 with the loaves and the fishes, Jesus encourages the disciples not to waste. He says, when they had all had enough to eat, he says to those disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of five barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. So you might ask, why does Jesus care what happens to this stuff? He made it, he can just make some more. Well, Jesus encourages us to not waste the things God's given us. And he encourages the disciples in this verse. We got the recycling phrase up there. Waste not, want not. Everybody knows that lesson around here. Proverbs 21:20 says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but the fools gulp theirs down. We're not supposed to waste the things we have. We're not supposed to go for gaudy and luxurious things, waste all our money, and we need to cherish things God's given us. But there's limits to everything in life. And you can't use that verse or these things to cover bad habits. So what bad habits might that be? Well, I'm not here tonight. Let's go here, the next one. Thanks. I'm not here tonight to say, put more money in the collection plate. We need more money here. We're a little low. This isn't a TV preacher lesson. Load up the collection basket. This is a lesson about us personally and how we look to money and how we should understand money with the rest of the world. Here's a picture of, nobody knows this, Mr. Krabs. If you don't know who Mr. Krabs is, if you've ever watched SpongeBob, he owns a restaurant and he's the cheapest man on earth. He gives his employees bills for breathing and he gives them 4-minute lunch breaks. He loves money, and that's his whole personality on the show. And I know it's a comical example, but my point of this lesson tonight is to say, how can you be a good influence to the world and be a good and convert others to Christianity as we're charged to do if you're Mr. Krabs? Can you say, you should really try out this Jesus thing, but hey, I need some money here later, and I don't really want to do this because that might hurt my bank or whatever. Now, I understand there are limits to money in life, and we are blessed in this congregation over and in this nation over, and you got to do what you got to do to get by. But if you're in a situation where you have money and you're not wanting, what's your attitude towards that? So here's an article that I found. Like I said, these are just some introspective things to check with yourself. Here is some signs to tell that you've crossed the line from being good stewards of your money to loving money. Are you trying to get more? Are you trying to grub the stuff that you have? So the first thing on there, the first sign, I added the extra examples. The ones on the left are what the article said. Breaking the rules. If you ever played golf before, Rick will know this, very easy to cross that turn once you paid for 9. So you get your 9 holes in, about half price, and you say, they'll never know. We'll just play the back 9, save $15 or 50 you're playing in Columbus. Then, is that right? Are you being a good steward of the money God has given you, or are you crossing the line to immoral? The next example, stealing. If you're starting to steal to save money, are you being a good steward of the money God has given you? The example I gave, this doesn't really work well in mom and dad's house because Wi-Fi doesn't extend past the door. But in my house in Dayton, if I get on the Wi-Fi list, there's 16 or 17 Wi-Fi's I can hack onto. And if you're smart enough, you can get on there and you can use the Wi-Fi that your neighbor's paying for. Now you say, well, I'm saving my money. I'm doing good work. God says, use the money wisely that you have, and I'm not wasting on Wi-Fi. But your neighbor's paying for that Wi-Fi. That's not very fair of you to steal his, is it? Or I said that this is one that applies to me. Cindy like this one too. At Chipotle, when you get to the end of the line, everybody at Chipotle, they'll say, what'd you have? Well, if you didn't know, there's a list of meats and they range from price. And then there's guacamole. And you got to say, well, chicken bowl, no guac. You got to say, if you got the guac, that you got the guac, because that costs extra. You can say, it's not my mistake. They didn't charge me. But are you stealing at that point? Question to ask yourself. Pressuring people for freebies. You're going around saying, can I borrow this from you? Can I borrow your mower? I have a mower, but I don't want to use my mower because then my mower will break. I want to break your mower. So ask that question. Now, like I said, I'm not sitting here calling everybody out. There's a point to this, and it's saying, how can you be a good example to the world if the world sees you as Mr. Krabs? Failing to leave a tip. This is going to be one of the bigger ones that we talk about in the next slide, so I'm going to skip that one. Hoarding. That's a big one. We're cleaning out the house right now because we got new carpet. There is so much junk that I haven't touched in 15 years. Do I need it? No. Am I ever going to touch it? Ever? No. But if I say, maybe I'll touch it someday, that is not, it's being greedy with my money. It's being cheap, not valuing your time. Now, this is a big one because God blesses us with every minute of time we get. And if we waste all our time trying to save a buck or two, we spent 10 to 12 hours trying to fix the sink in my house that the landlord would have fixed for free that I could have spent doing other stuff. Am I saving money? Am I being a good steward of my money, or am I wasting the time that God's given me? Not paying your fair share. If you're doing something with people and you just try to skip by it, well, they'll cover it. It'll be all right. Complaining about the price of everything. I fall into this category sometimes. I know gas is high, but in the end, am I driving from Barnesville to Dayton every weekend? Probably. That's just, it's a cultural thing, complaining about the price of things. But in the end, is that going to help you convert people to Christ? And then the last one, having a social life. If we are neglecting our church family because we don't want to spend our money on things like that, I want to go buy a new set of golf clubs. I want to go buy a new gun rather than spending time. And if that involves money with my church family, is that a good use of your money and time? So here's what inspired me to go to this lesson. So the Sunday church crowd. So you probably heard about this before, and you can attest to this as a person who's worked as a waiter than anybody else. So if you ask a waiter, what's the worst day to work? It's not Friday with the drunks. It's not Saturday with a 2-hour wait. It's not Tuesday and all you can eat chicken wing night. It's Sunday. Why is it Sunday? Let's read this article. This is from a Christian woman who wrote this article about being a waiter and working on Sunday morning and so after Sunday lunch. I'm a Christian currently working in the food industry. So I'm writing this article because it's extremely important the church understands how critical the restaurant experience is during Sunday lunch. Several individuals I work with are unbelievers. What they say about the church crowd is gut-wrenching. They talk about how they hate the church crowds because they are the rudest, most demanding people of the week and don't tip well. I absolutely hated working on Sundays having to deal with the church crowd. They were always the loudest, most demanding, and rudest people, especially when they came in as a group. They would run you like crazy and leave the most pitiful tip in gospel tracts. So this is nationwide too. This is not in Ohio. This is all over, and Ethan can tell you it's the same in Ohio. So if this doesn't apply to you, then great, keep it up. Try to make up for it in other ways. But if you find yourself being part of the problem here, we need to be good influences with our money to the world, because this is the image we have now. You got 12 people come in to the restaurant after church. They run the waiter like crazy, and then they leave them a Bible verse as a tip. Now, is that a bad thing to leave them a Bible verse? No. But if you didn't leave them a tip, which they worked for, are they going to have a good attitude about that Bible verse? Say, thanks for the Bible verse. I'll try to trade that for groceries later today. No, that's not how it works. So if you find yourself interacting with people in the world, and in stores anywhere, if you're trying to be Mr. Krabs, examine yourself and say, am I really being a good influence to these people? Am I being a good steward of the money I've been given? Or am I trying, is it the love of money? Next in this verse. I think I already have it. 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6 says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation, trap into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So in this verse, Paul talking to Timothy does not say having money is evil. If you have money, you're evil and you're going to hell. Does not say that. He says the love of money. And we often equate that to the love of gaining money, going to doing whatever you can to get extra money. But it also applies, it's one of my lessons tonight, to the money that you have and your attitude towards money. Are you trying to do everything you can to shortchange another person to save your own money? And you can, and with the defense of, I'm just doing my best with the money God has given me. I'm trying to be a good steward of my money. Or are you crossing that line into the love of money? And a good story about this in the Bible comes from John chapter 12. And it's the story of Judas and the perfume. So John chapter 12, verse 1, it reads, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't his perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, because he was a thief. As a keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You always have the poor among you, and you will not always have me. So there's a lot of lessons we can learn from this passage in John. The first lesson, or just thing to understand, is that Judas was consumed by money in lots of ways. He was consumed in getting money. He betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. It was consumed by it. And I mean, he was an apostle, so he couldn't have been rotten to the core. I mean, he had to have been good at some point to get into that position. But that's what money can do to you, whether you had it or not. This is money that they did have. They said he had the money bag. He used to reach into it, help himself out sometimes. So the first lesson I want to say from this is, what are you giving to God? This is separate from this, but this is a good point to make from this passage. Are you giving your best to God? Are you giving him the expensive perfume that cost a year's wages? I don't even know what that'd be. It will say $50,000. Are you giving him the Febreze that you have in the fridge? Like, are you? That's just the analogy. But we need to ensure that we are giving our best of everything to God in whatever we do. And the next example, or lesson to learn from this passage is that Jesus said, it doesn't matter, Judas. He was just, what are you doing? You're wasting all this money. We could have sold it, done all this good with it. And you're wasting it. You're pouring it out on your feet. Gone. The point is that Judas was consumed with the money. He didn't care what they were doing with the money. He didn't care that Jesus was about to die, was about to be gone. He was just concerned with that act. And he totally missed the rest of the point about how righteous Jesus was and how important this moment was. So in our lives, we need to ensure that when we're in circumstances where we have an opportunity to do good, we have an opportunity to be a good influence on our kids, or our coworkers, or our friends, or anybody who's watching. Because another thing to take note of is that when we're in the world, just like I said this morning, or before I started this lesson, they're going to be looking for whatever they can to discredit you. They're going to say, well, he goes to church at West Main Street, or he calls himself a Christian, but he's the cheapest guy I ever met. Why would I ever go to that place? Why would I care what he has to say? We can't have, I mean, everybody has flaws, but we need to ensure that we are blameless in the end of the world, and that in the name of Jesus's message, because of this reason. So to take from that lesson, don't miss the forest for the trees. In an instance where you have an opportunity to do good and to influence another person, don't let your attitude towards money prevent that from happening. And just a picture of a couple instances where this could happen. We're going to go to the verse that says it's better to give than receive. Are you the guy that does something for somebody that says, if you ever don't know what Venmo is, it's an app on your phone that you can request or send somebody money. So if I do something for you, I'm gonna be like, hey, how about $20 for that pizza I bought you? Or are we going to give, which is better than receiving, like this says here? Like I said, I know money is tight and you got to do what you got to do to make it through the day. But if you're in a circumstance where that's not the case, ask yourself that question. Are you the waiter that goes to a restaurant? Are you the person that goes to a restaurant and leaves a bad impression on the waitress and turns her off from Christianity because of the way you act? We talked about it in Bible study this morning. A lot of times when people criticize Christianity, it's because of the actions of Christians. And we know that's wrong because you can't judge a belief by its believers, but we can't perpetuate that belief by giving them something to talk about. So, in the verse I just brought up, Acts 20, verses 32 through 35. Starting verses 32. Now I commit you to God, to the word of his grace, which can build you up and give you an inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I have not coveted anyone's silver or gold or clothing. You yourselves know that these hands of mine have supplied my own needs and the needs of my companions. And everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak. Remembering the words of the Lord, Jesus himself said, it is more blessed to give than receive. But Paul said, everything I have, I've done it myself, or with the support of others. So we can see other verses. And he said, he doesn't covet anyone's stuff, gold or silver in that instance, or clothing. But we need to really focus on that last passage and thinking about that in everything we do in life. It is better to give than receive. If somebody owes you money, how many verses in the Bible cover forgiving a debt? It's endless. It's mentioned so many times because we have been forgiven the biggest debt in the end. We've been forgiven the debt of our sins, which was unforgivable before the death of Jesus. And how can we teach and preach to the people that they need to come to Jesus so that they can have their sins forgiven as well, like we did when we are holding everybody to every single dollar and penny that they owe us, because that falls under the love of money category. Another verse in Luke chapter 6, verses 37 through 38, it says, do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you'll be forgiven. Give and it will be passed down to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over will be poured into your lap. For the measure you use, it will be measured to you. That's the verse that I have highlighted on my screen. I didn't do it on there. The measure we use to interact with other people, whether they're friends or not, or just strangers in the world, that measure is used to us. We are judged by the standard we use. So if we want to be treated generously, we need to act generously to other people and not be consumed with these thoughts, these monetary and financial thoughts. Wrapping up the lesson, a couple more verses to look at. First Corinthians, I think it is. I just have Corinthians. I think it's First Corinthians. Chapter 9, verses 19 through 23. It says, just being the whole goal of my lesson tonight. Though I am free and belong to no one, I made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like under the law. I became like one under the law. Though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those not under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. Though I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law. So as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I became all these things so that by all possible means, I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I might share in its blessings. So this kind of goes back to the lesson I preached last time. I don't remember when it was, but about tact. Paul, he adjusted his demeanor and his attitude to be who he was with, because he knew that if these people are comfortable with me, if these people know what I'm talking about, if I'm familiar to them, I'll have a better chance of converting them to the gospel and for them to accept the truth. In our circumstance, if we are easy to receive to people, if we're warm and generous and always, so that guy give you the shirt off his back, then people are going to be more likely to receive the things that we have. If you go to that, if people can say, that church at West Main will do anything for you. And I'm not pointing out anybody in here specifically who doesn't do these things. This lesson just needs to be heard of all, because we're all tempted by money. I would venture to say that money is probably the largest temptation out there, because it gives you so much access to everything. You need money to live, and it improves your lifestyle. So the point of this lesson tonight is, how far do you take that? Be a good steward of your money. One example before I close tonight is between, if you ever heard of the families, two families, one of them still is active today in society, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. John Rockefeller started the oil company back in the 1800s. Andrew Carnegie started the steel company. If you go up to Pittsburgh, every library has Andrew Carnegie's name on it. And the one in Ireland we saw, 4,000 miles away, he was building 3 libraries all over the world with his money. That's what he did with it. And John Rockefeller hoarded his money. He became the richest man to ever live to this date, even with all the guys today that are climbing that ladder. And his family had a disease, mental disease. A lot of them died from it. And in that disease, they had a chronic condition where they thought they were going to be poor. One of his daughters would collect the crusts of bread from people's plates after they ate, because she was worried that she was going to starve if they ever ran out of money. And they had $200 billion, which who knows what that equates to today. Some of the families would hire people to watch the staff to make sure they weren't stealing food from the kitchen, because they were so consumed by saving their money, even though they had endless amounts. So don't think it can't affect you. Even these people who had more money and resources than the world has ever known died, and their family still has money today for that show for it, with some corruption here and there. But the Carnegies, he gave one daughter $1 million, which to his billions of dollars he had before is really not that much. And he doesn't have a family allowed today because he gave all his money away before he died. So consider that with your own life. I know we're not going to be in those circumstances most likely, but don't think that these issues can't affect you today, because it can affect to the very top and the very bottom. So hopefully you take something from the lesson I had tonight. Like I said, I wasn't going to preach very long, but hopefully everybody took something from it. If anybody has any needs of the congregation tonight, would like the prayers of the congregation, you can come up front. We can have a discussion with you about that. Or if you wish to be added to the Lord's number tonight, we can make that happen. You can become baptized if you as you come up front, we stand and sing.